The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 1. I woke up to the sound of silence. Not the comfortable kind, not the kind that comes after rain or before dawn, but a hollow, aching absence of life, like someone had pressed pause on the world. The first thing I noticed was the smell, faint, metallic, like rust mixed with dust. I sat up, blinking against the pale, washed-out light leaking through my curtains. The clock on my desk read 6:02 a.m. My phone dead. No missed calls, no messages, just a black screen, and then I realized the worst part. I remembered my name, but I couldn't remember the name of my street or my city. I tried again, forcing the syllables into my head. Nothing. It was like pushing my hand into water and coming up with nothing but wet skin. The only thing I could recall clearly was this: my name was Marta Yelchenko, I was 21, a journalism student, and something was very, very wrong. I stepped outside, clutching my coat against the morning chill. The streets were emptier than they had any right to be. Usually, by this hour, the old man across the street would be watering his tomato plants, muttering about the weather. Now his yard was deserted. A woman in a yellow coat shuffled past me, her eyes darting nervously. "Excuse me," I said, my voice too loud in the still air. "Do you know?" She froze, looking at me like I'd spoken in another language. "Do I know what?" she asked. "The name of this place." Her forehead wrinkled. "This place?" She swallowed, her throat bobbing. "It's Her face tightened as if she were pulling against an invisible thread. "Aika." She turned abruptly and walked away faster than before, her shoes clicking like a metronome against the pavement. I headed toward the main square. It should have been filled with the usual chaos: the busker with the accordion, the kids feeding pigeons, the constant rumble of buses. Instead, there were only a few scattered figures moving aimlessly, each one with that same vacant, unsettled look. A man stood in front of the fountain, gripping the stone edge hard enough for his knuckles to go white. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up at me, his lips trembling. "I woke up," he said slowly, "and my wife, she doesn't remember her name, and now," his eyes darted side to side, "now I'm starting to forget mine." Panic began to coil in my stomach. Names were just the beginning. Without them, what else could disappear? Memories, faces, the meaning of the things around us. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. A loud bang cracked through the square. Everyone turned toward the sound. A metal trash can lay on its side, rolling slightly. But there was no one near it, no wind. Then, from the alley beside the bakery, I saw something move, not someone, something. It was shaped like a shadow, but it didn't belong to anything. It stretched along the wall in a jagged, unnatural way, rippling as if it were breathing. For one awful moment I thought it was watching me. When I blinked, it was gone. By the time I reached my apartment again, the air felt heavier, like the day itself was sinking. I sat on my bed, trying to write everything down, every street corner I could recall, every person I knew, afraid that if I didn't, it would vanish from my mind. 3 names were already missing. That was when I saw the note under my door. A single sheet of paper written in blocky handwriting: "You're not supposed to remember." The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 2. I stared at the note until my eyes blurred. It wasn't the words that frightened me most. It was the feeling that whoever wrote it knew exactly who I was, and that they had been inside my building. I checked the hallway, empty. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds. My neighbor's door, apartment 3B, hung slightly ajar. I remembered her name yesterday. Now it was gone. I shut my own door, locked it twice, and read the note again. The edges were damp, as if the writer's hand had been sweating. "You're not supposed to remember." The next morning, I decided to test something. I stood in the square and asked 10 strangers, "Do you remember your name?" 7 couldn't answer at all. They would start to speak and then stop, their faces twisting with confusion. 2 gave me first names but not last. 1 woman said nothing and just started crying. But the strangest part was the man who followed me afterward. He was tall, wearing a black coat despite the warm weather, his hair slicked back in a style that seemed out of time. I ducked into a side street, pretending not to notice him. He turned the corner after me without hesitation. "You remember," he said. It wasn't a question. I stopped walking. "Do you?" His lips twitched, not a smile, not quite a frown. "Enough to know this place is dying." "What's happening here?" I asked. "Not here." He glanced toward the rooftops. "They're listening." We met in the basement of an abandoned bookstore at the edge of town. The smell of old paper and mildew clung to the air. Inside, there were 5 others sitting around a dusty table. Each one looked exhausted but alert, like people living on the edge of a cliff. "This is the memory hold," the man in black explained, "the last people who can still name themselves for now." They told me that every week more memories vanished, names, addresses, birthdays. At first people noticed, they panicked, but the more they forgot, the less they cared. Eventually the fear faded too. And those who remembered for too long disappeared. "How?" I asked. My voice sounded too small in the cold room. "We don't know exactly," said a woman with a scar running down her cheek. "We call them the shadows. You see them right before someone's gone. No one comes back." My pulse quickened. "I saw one yesterday." The group exchanged uneasy glances. The man in black slid something across the table, a notebook half full of hurried handwriting. "Write down everything you remember, every detail, don't lose it, don't let them touch it." I picked it up, feeling the worn leather under my fingers. The pages smelled faintly of smoke. That night I dreamed of the square. It was empty except for the fountain. Water spilled over the sides, black and thick like oil. In the reflection, I saw faces not mine, not anyone I knew, mouthing words I couldn't hear. When I woke, there was a knock at my door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze, notebook clutched against my chest. Through the peephole, the hallway was dark, too dark. The light outside my door was gone, and in that darkness something moved. The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 3. The darkness outside my door wasn't just the absence of light. It felt alive. I pressed my ear to the wood. No footsteps, no voices. Only a faint, low hiss like air escaping from a tire, but slower, heavier. My hand tightened around the notebook. The hiss grew louder, then something slid across the floor, a soft, deliberate scrape. I stepped back. My apartment seemed suddenly smaller, the air thinner. A shadow, impossibly tall and jagged, seeped through the narrow gap under the door. It didn't look like smoke or mist. It was sharper, like someone had torn a hole in the world, and this was what leaked out. The moment it touched the base of my bookshelf, the books began to fade. Not vanish, fade. The colors bled away first, then the outlines blurred until only blank paper remained. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. The shadow recoiled, slipping back toward the crack. The hallway light flickered on again, just for a second, and I caught sight of a man standing outside 3B. He was there one heartbeat, gone the next. And then came the screaming. I ran into the hall. The woman from 3B, my neighbor whose name I'd forgotten, was pressed against the far wall, eyes wide and wet with terror. She wasn't looking at me, she was staring at the empty space where the man had been. He was just, she stammered, her breath hitching, and then nothing. Her voice cracked on the last word. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The space felt wrong now, as if the air had been scooped out of it. My skin prickled. I pulled her to her feet and dragged her toward my apartment, but she resisted. "I don't remember his name," she whispered, shaking. "I don't remember his face. Was he ever real?" I didn't answer, because in that moment I wasn't sure either. By the time I got back inside, my bookshelf was empty, not just of books, of shelves. Only smooth, featureless wood remained, as if nothing had ever been there. The notebook in my hand suddenly felt heavier. I flipped it open. The last page I'd written, my own name, the date, the description of the shadow, was smudged. The ink seemed to be melting into the paper. The next morning I went back to the memory hold. "They took someone last night," I told them. "He just vanished like he'd never existed." The scarred woman's eyes narrowed. "Then they know you can see them." The man in black stepped closer. "It's too soon," he muttered. "Too soon for what?" I asked. He met my gaze. "For you to choose." That night they gave me a map. It wasn't of the whole city, just the parts that still existed in their memories. The rest was blank. Entire blocks, neighborhoods, streets gone. "You'll start to notice," the man in black said. "The more you remember, the smaller the city gets." "Why me?" I asked. His expression didn't change. "Because you haven't started forgetting yet. And that means either you're the last one who can stop this, or the next one they'll take." I didn't sleep. At 3:17 a.m. I heard the hiss again, not at my door this time, but somewhere outside in the street below. I looked out my window and saw 3 shadows moving toward my building. The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 4. The 3 shadows glided across the pavement with a speed that didn't match their stillness. They didn't sway or stretch like normal darkness, they flowed, each movement sharp, deliberate, too precise to be human. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. The notebook was still in my hand. If they could erase objects, even people, could they erase what I'd written? The hiss was louder now, a chorus instead of a single note. Then, without warning, my lamp blinked out. The shadows were inside. They didn't break doors. They didn't need to. They seeped through the walls like they were made of smoke and knives. I bolted for the hallway. The stairwell was darker than it should have been, each step swallowed by thick black edges. My shoes pounded against the concrete, every echo swallowed by that relentless hiss. Halfway down, I glanced over my shoulder. They were following, not running, not even moving in a way that made sense. But each time I blinked, they were closer. I hit the street and ran. The city looked wrong. Storefront signs were blank. Street lamps stood without light. A row of cars was nothing but outlines, their colors and details eaten away, leaving faint silhouettes in the fog. Somewhere behind me, the hiss sharpened, turning into a thin, metallic shriek. I ducked into an alley, heart slamming in my chest. A dumpster loomed ahead, but it wasn't there in the way things should be there. It was flat, drained of depth, like a photograph left too long in the sun. The edges began to curl as I stared at it. Footsteps, not the shadows, real human footsteps. Here, a voice hissed. I turned. The scarred woman from the memory hold stood at the far end of the alley, one hand outstretched, the other clutching a revolver. "Move." I sprinted toward her just as the first shadow reached the mouth of the alley. She raised the gun and fired. The sound was deafening, but the bullet didn't hit anything. It ripped the air. The shadow flinched, its edges shivering, and for the first time it retreated. She dragged me into a narrow service door and slammed it shut. We plunged into darkness, real darkness, heavy with dust and the smell of rusted metal. "You led them straight to you," she said, her voice low but sharp. "They came on their own. They always come for those who remember too much." Her eyes glinted in the dark. "Now you have to decide if you're running or fighting." The man in black was waiting for us in the basement. "They're escalating," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "They don't usually hunt in threes." Something changed. I clutched the notebook tighter. "It's me, isn't it? I'm the change." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe you're the key." That night, as I tried to sleep on a thin mattress in the corner of the basement, I overheard their voices in the next room. "If she stays, they'll come for all of us," the scarred woman said. "If she leaves, she's dead by morning," the man replied. There was a long pause, and then, in a tone I almost didn't recognize, he said, "Unless we send her into the blanks." The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 5. I didn't know what the blanks meant, but when they finally took me there, I wished I'd never asked. We left before dawn. The streets were unnaturally still, their edges blurring into gray mist. The man in black walked ahead, the scarred woman behind me like a guard. We passed blocks I recognized, or thought I did, until the signs, buildings, even the air started to lose their texture. The first blank was just one street over from where I used to buy coffee. At least, I think it was. The pavement stopped, not like it had ended in rubble, but as if someone had deleted the rest of it. Beyond the edge was a flat expanse of white-gray nothing stretching in all directions. It didn't look like fog. Fog moves, this didn't. "They eat the city from the inside," the man in black said. "Everything they touch becomes part of this. The longer it's gone, the less anyone remembers it existed." I stepped closer to the edge. My shadow fell across the blank and instantly vanished. My chest tightened. I pulled my foot back before my toes could cross the boundary. "How do you even walk in there?" I asked. "You don't, you anchor yourself," he replied. He handed me a length of coarse rope. "Tie it to something real and don't let go." Inside the blank, the silence was worse than anything in the city. No echoes, no wind, just the faint sound of my own breathing and the strange, distant hum like a refrigerator in another room. The world here was wrong. My footsteps didn't make prints. When I turned my head, the horizon seemed to tilt slightly, as though it was adjusting itself when I wasn't looking. A shape appeared ahead. Not a shadow, not exactly. It was the outline of a building, faint and flickering like an old film reel. As I moved closer, it sharpened into my old school. I knew every brick, every window, except when I blinked, the building was gone again. "Memories live here," the scarred woman said quietly behind me. "Things the shadows have taken but not yet erased completely. If you can find them, you can take them back. But if they see you," the man in black added, "they'll take you too." I spotted movement to my left, a dark ripple cutting through the nothingness. It was headed straight for me. "Run!" the scarred woman snapped. I turned and sprinted, the rope tugging tight against my waist. The hum grew louder, warping into a deep vibration that rattled my teeth. My foot caught on something that shouldn't have been there, a step, a curb, and I stumbled. When I looked up, it was standing over me. A shadow, but here in the blanks it wasn't flat. It had depth, height. Its edges folded over each other like torn cloth in water. It leaned closer and the air around it felt like ice and static all at once. Then it reached for my face. The rope jerked hard, yanking me backward. My body slid across the smooth nothing until I was over the edge, collapsing onto the cracked pavement of the real street. The man in black cut the rope with a knife. "You were seconds away," he said, voice tight. Seconds away from what I didn't ask. I already knew. That night, as I wrote down everything I'd seen, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The building I'd found in the blanks, my old school, wasn't something I'd forgotten. It was something I'd never been to in my life. The city that forgot its name, Part 6. I didn't sleep. The image of that building, my old school that I'd never set foot in, looped through my head like a glitching video. Every time I closed my eyes, I was standing in front of it again, staring at its red brick walls, the chipped green door, the tall windows with sunlight spilling through. The sunlight hurt, not like brightness, like a burn. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it. When I told the memory hold what I'd seen, they went still. "You're not supposed to find other people's memories," the scarred woman said at last. "That's not how it works." The man in black stepped forward. "Describe it, every detail." I did, and when I finished, his jaw was tight. "That school burned down 30 years ago," he said, "in a fire that killed everyone inside." I shook my head, "But I've never been there." "That's the point," he said. "The blanks are showing you pieces of the city that no longer exist in anyone's mind, except you." The room seemed to tilt. "Why me?" He didn't answer at first. He just studied me, his eyes sharp like he was weighing every word. "Finally, because you weren't born here." I frowned. "So, plenty of people move to—" I stopped myself. "To where?" The name of the city still wouldn't come. My throat tightened. "You're an anomaly," he said. "They can't erase what you never had, but you can carry it back for the rest of us. That makes you dangerous and valuable." "And a target," the scarred woman added. That night I dreamed of the school again, but this time I was inside. Children's voices echoed down long, dim hallways. A bell rang. My shoes stuck slightly to the floor as if it had been freshly mopped. I turned a corner and saw a boy standing at the end of the hall. He was about 12, his eyes were gray, and he was holding my notebook. I took a step toward him. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He turned and walked into a classroom. When I followed, there was no room, only a wall of moving shadow. I woke with my hands gripping the notebook so hard my knuckles ached. And there, on the last page in handwriting that wasn't mine, were 4 words: "You have their names." The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 7. I stared at the words until they seemed to press up from the paper. "You have their names." My pen was still on the desk where I'd left it. No one had been in my room. No one could have been, not without me hearing, unless they didn't need doors. I brought the notebook to the memory hold. The scarred woman read the words once, then slammed the cover shut. "You need to burn it." "No," the man in black said sharply. "If she really has their names, she's holding on to people who have been erased. Names are the anchors, we could bring them back." I blinked. "You mean the people the shadows took?" "Not just them," he said. "Everyone the city has lost, decades of them." The air in the basement seemed heavier now, like the shadows themselves were leaning against the walls to listen. That night the bargaining began. I woke to the hiss close inside my room. The temperature had dropped so sharply my breath curled in front of me. In the far corner the darkness thickened, folding in on itself. And then, a voice, not loud, not soft, just there: "Give them back." My fingers tightened around the notebook. "Give who back?" The darkness rippled, and for a moment I thought I saw a face inside it, pale, stretched thin, with eyes that looked like bottomless holes. "We keep the names so they don't suffer. You carry them, they hurt." "They're not yours," I said. The hiss sharpened, vibrating through my bones. "You will learn they were never yours either." Before I could speak, the darkness peeled away from the corner and slipped back under the door, leaving the air warm again. When I checked the notebook, 5 names were gone. I couldn't remember whose. In the morning, I told the memory hold. "They're afraid of you," the man in black said. "Afraid you'll figure out how to use what you've got." "Or," the scarred woman said grimly, "they're trying to convince her to help them on her own." That night I made a decision. I would go back into the blanks alone. If the shadows wanted these names so badly, then whatever they meant, it was my only leverage. The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 8. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. If I did, they'd try to stop me, and worse, they might follow. At dawn, I stood at the edge of the blanks with the notebook in my hand. No rope, no anchor. No way back except on my own. The nothingness in front of me shimmered faintly like heat rising off asphalt. I stepped forward. The air inside was heavy, pressing against my skin like water. My heartbeat sounded too loud, and with every step the hum in the blanks deepened, vibrating through my ribs. Almost immediately I began to see them, flickers of buildings, people, objects, half-formed and glitching at the edges. An old bus stop? A dog chained to nothing. A man in a suit reading a newspaper where there was no bench to sit on. Each one faded as soon as I blinked. I kept walking until I saw something solid, a classroom desk. Wooden, scratched with a faint engraving of initials on the side, AK. My fingers brushed the surface and the room around it started to take shape. Chairs, chalkboard, sunlight, and then, whispering, dozens of voices. They weren't speaking words exactly, but the sound slid under my skin, pulling at me. The notebook in my hand grew hot. I opened it. Names poured onto the pages. Not written, but appearing one after another in jagged ink, filling lines faster than I could read them. I didn't recognize most, but a few made my chest ache like they belonged to faces I should know. Then, the hum stopped. The shadows came from all directions here in the blanks. They were vast, towering things with shapes that shifted too fast to follow. They didn't move toward me like predators this time. They circled. You're carrying what we keep. Their voice wasn't one, it was many, layered and broken. I can give them back, I said, and we can unmake you. The pages in the notebook began to turn on their own, the ink blurring. My fingertips went numb. The edges of my hands began to lose their outline. I realized too late what was happening. The blanks were taking me. I clutched the notebook, forcing myself to focus on the sound of my own voice. My name is Marta Yelchenko, I said aloud. I am not yours. The shadows shuddered, the hum cracked, and suddenly the ground beneath me gave way. I landed on a cracked sidewalk under a gray sky. My city was around me again, but something was wrong. Every single sign, street name, and billboard now had words, and they were all names. The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 9. I stood in the middle of the street, the notebook heavy in my hands. The city looked full, too full. Every wall, every shop window, every scrap of paper carried a name, scrawled, printed, carved. Some shimmered faintly as if they were still deciding whether to stay. People were staring, not at the names, at me. The man in black found me within an hour. What did you do? He demanded. I brought them back, I said. No, he shook his head. You didn't bring them back, you brought them here. He turned me toward the street. A boy I'd never seen before was walking past, but his outline was flickering, his face shifting through expressions that didn't match his steps. The name Elias Moraz floated faintly above his head like steam. They're not alive, the scarred woman said from behind us. They're echoes, the city's wearing them like masks. That night the whispers started, not from the shadows, from the names themselves. They rose from the walls, the windows, the ground, pressing into my ears until I couldn't tell which voices were mine. And in the middle of it all, a single clear sentence emerged. You can give us bodies. The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 10. The voices didn't stop. They followed me into sleep, into waking, threading through my thoughts until I couldn't tell where they ended and I began. The names in my notebook pulsed like a heartbeat. Every time I touched the cover, I felt a pull, a promise that if I just let go, they would step out into the world whole. The man in black caught me staring at it one morning. Don't, he said. His voice wasn't sharp this time. It was tired. If you give them bodies, they'll need space, and space means something else has to go. What goes? I asked. He didn't answer. That night the shadows came, not 3, not a dozen, all of them. They poured down the streets like a tide of living black, swallowing light, curling around corners without slowing. The scarred woman shoved a pack into my arms. If they take you, it's over. They're not here to take her, the man in black said grimly. They're here to end her. We ran. The city warped as we moved, buildings stretching taller, streets narrowing, the air thickening like syrup. The names on the walls began to peel away, floating upward like ash. Let us in, the voices whispered. A shadow surged ahead of us, cutting off the street. Another rose behind, its edges splintering into jagged spikes. They won't let you keep both worlds, the man in black said. You have to choose them or us. I looked at the notebook. It felt alive in my hands, warm now instead of cold, the cover flexing with each heartbeat. In that moment, I understood. The names weren't just memories, they were the city's foundation. If I gave them bodies, the erased would return, but the city as it is now would vanish to make room. Everyone who still existed would be gone. The shadows pressed closer, the air hummed with their hunger. I choose. The words caught in my throat, my hand tightened around the notebook. The names inside it shouted, "The City That Forgot Its Name, Part 11. The shadows tightened their circle. The man in black's hand hovered near my shoulder, ready to push me toward escape or toward surrender. The scarred woman's eyes were locked on the notebook like it was a live grenade. The names pulsed, a storm trapped under leather. "Choose," the voices whispered. "Choose," the shadows hissed. "I choose them," I said. I opened the notebook. The names burst out in a torrent of light, not warm but blinding, a white fire that burned without heat. The shadows screamed, their edges twisting into nothing as the light poured over the city. One by one, the names found bodies. People appeared where there had been empty streets, strangers, children, the elderly, lovers meeting in the middle of crosswalks. The air filled with voices, laughter, crying, and then silence. I turned. The man in black and the scarred woman were gone. Everyone I'd known was gone. The city was